Hello, you are watching Focus of the Week. This is weekly talk show of Radio Jipa and News Cafe G, and I'm Ani Gabrielian. The topic of this week's talk show is national movements and the impact on minorities. Our guests are Evgeny Mikheladze, head of the board of National Front, and Georgi Tskadaya, lecturer at Ilia State University. Hello.
Hello.
Nice
Hello.
to have you here, and we can start the conversation. And will you, Evgeny, just tell about your movement and what you're actually doing and what you have already done?
Okay. First of all, I express my gratitude for invitation here, and I would say that National Front was registered as a non-governmental organization on February 27, 2013 this year, and the main goal of our organization is to defend and protect national values of the Georgian people and the Georgian nation, both in Georgia and all over the world.
So I know that your organization is doing some movements against migrants.
Yes.
What can you tell when it starts actually?
The former government, the so-called National Movement of Georgia, United National Movement of Georgia, introduced a visa-free regime with about 80 countries of Africa and Asia. And many migrants till now are coming to this country without any restriction, and this is nonsense. While in the period when many Georgian nationals have gone out to foreign countries to seek job places, Georgia receives many migrants and employs them here. And this is entirely unacceptable for our organization. And we had the first protest rally against the existing visa regime on November 10 this year. And we think that every nation in this world has its space, its borders, and the space and borders must be protected to ensure the existence of this or that nation. Without these restrictions and this protection, our nation, our small nation, may be disappeared from the world map.
So can we formulate it like you're protesting against government more than against migrants who are working here?
Yes, our main protest is directed against the government, because it is up on the government to regulate this visa regime with African and Asian countries. Israeli law clearly determines what is Hebrew national. The Israeli legislation says Hebrew is a person who is Hebrew in mother and who confess Judaism. No person in the world will say that this is fascism and this is Nazism. But if you take this sample in Georgia, the so-called liberal society will accuse us of fascism and Nazism.
If we will start talking about the types of your protests and talking about November movement.
Okay.
When people in that action start to destroy some things on the way for a tourist restaurant.
Okay, another problem is that this uncontrolled arrival of immigrants, they have started introducing their own rules in this country. There are many Turkish, Iranian and Arab bars and clubs where Georgian nationals cannot enter there by national and gender sign. and our protest is just, and we have right and we are obliged to our country, before our country, to express our protest and correct this unacceptable situation.
By doing what?
We held protest rally in front of Turkish clubs under the Rose Revolution Square, and our main demand is that the government should investigate such cases as involvement of small girls in prostitution and violation of rights of Georgian nationals by gender and by national sign. And we demand that the government close these clubs and bars.
Okay, Georgi, do you know cases like that, or does government
Yes,
try to find out these kind of cases?
Right. There was rumors that such practice really exists, that Georgian nationals are not allowed to these prostitution houses, which are owned by the foreigners. I don't know to what extent this is true, but if this is true, of course, this is clearly a discrimination against a particular ethnic group, and as he also said, it's also a discrimination of a particular types of people. I think that is wrong, but my problem is that in which terms we try to address the problem. Almost all of us agree that if this is true, it's a problem, but we differ on how we approach the problem. So, as he said, his perspective is clearly national, so he thinks that we have to defend the specifically Georgian nationals, not every ethnic groups against this kind of discrimination. I think that we have to take this other perspective, non-nationalistic perspective. We have to defend every ethnic groups against this kind of discrimination, whether or not they belong to Georgian ethnic group, or maybe they are Armenian, for instance, or Azeri, or Americans, I don't know. But regardless of their ethnic belonging and national belonging, they are entitled to have equal rights and equal benefits in the society. And this is also the problem about immigration, because I understand that immigration is a legitimate concern of the citizens of every country in the world, even in the United States, where the country is basically made up by the immigrants, right, who arrived at this place at some point in the historical past. So even in the U.S., they have problems against immigration. But here again, my central concern is from what perspective we approach this problem. And nationalists prefer a nationalistic perspective. For instance, in the United States, American nationalists say that we are defending our American culture and Americanness, so to say. And Georgians defending their Georgianness, Germans defending their German national values, and French, like they have this national front in France, who is defending the French culture and French French nationality, so to say, Frenchness. And the problem of immigration is basically an economic problem, because the locals fear the threat of competition in the labor market. from the immigrants, and this threat is legitimate. I mean, I also think that to some extent we have to regulate immigration because it might pose a problem to the local economy, and every state in the world defends itself from this kind of economic threats. But this is not a nationalistic or ethnic threat. This is purely economic threat.
I agree with Georgi in most parts, but I would say that there is no other cases of discrimination against other nations, as I know. The main problem is that in our country someone wants to discriminate Georgian nationals, and we express our protest against this. If these facts were recorded in any other countries, I am sure in any other countries developments would be more dramatic and maybe even tragic.
So when some nationalistic parties are saying that people who are coming from other countries, investing here, having their own business,
yes.
And why do you think that they are doing bad things to economy, not investing in it?
We should take into account that our population's economic potential is very low, and investment wedge must be very high. That I mean, about 1 million American dollars should be investment wedge in this country, so as foreign nationals could not create here middle class, and this possibility is not available for Georgian nationals. And this is economic threat for our Georgian nation. We believe and we are sure that Georgian nation and representatives of Georgian nation must create middle class in Georgia and not other nationals. So these investments should be higher, so as our market be protected here.
So when I said that I believe that in every country there should be some set of regulations against the foreign immigrants, I meant only immigrants. I didn't mean investment. If the investment complies with the local rules, if the foreign companies comply with the local the regulations, if they do not pollute the environment, do not pay don't pay attention to wider social problems, like do not have the social corporate responsibility, then of course this is a problem, right? Because when you're investing in a country, you have to some extent show that you care about this country, right? So if they comply with the local rules and regulations, I have nothing against the foreign direct investment. I think that it is one of the ways where this is one of the prospects that we have for the economic development. But as for the immigration, I think this is another matter, because like in the US and in Russia and in the European Union, immigration can be viewed from a non-nationalist perspective as well. I mean, non-ethnic nationalist perspective. It can be viewed as an economic threat to the country if, like, the country is overwhelmed by the immigrants. There will be the resources, economic resources are scarce, and there will not be enough resources for everyone, and so forth. So it can be a problem, but as for investment, I think investment is a wholly different sub-matter. I mean, if the foreign multinational corporations comply with the local rules and show some degree of responsibility and accountability towards the Georgian society, then I personally have no problem. And about this middle class issue, yes, I mean, of course, I mean, when the foreign investors invest in the country, they should promote they should employ the local population. I think this is the rule.
So not they don't.
I mean, some of them do, but but the government does not require them to, in some cases, to employ the local population. I think this is a problem because, I mean, this is, I think, a very general conduct, business ethics that you have to, I mean, wherever you invest, you have to care about that particular society or community and so forth. This is a problem not only in Georgia but everywhere, like
what is the reason
in China. The reason is that the government fears that, well, for instance, if you are the CEO of this large company, you invest in Georgia, and the Georgian government says to you that you have to comply with certain regulations, you might change your mind. You might consider to invest in Armenia, not in Georgia, right? Yeah. So the governments are in this kind of competition. So this is the so-called, we call it in political economy, race to the bottom, which means that the governments are in this global competition, and for instance, Armenia can outsell Georgia because it can offer lower standards of regulations. So this is a problem. It's not totally government's fault because this is a problem of the global system. I mean, if you offer if you offer, like, if I require them to have this and this regulations, they might not, you know, invest in Georgia, invest in China.
I would add that Georgian labor market should be protected. We know that many investors take their compatriots here, and this is a violation of the rights of the Georgian nation, because there is a real problem with employment in Georgia, and Georgian citizens need new job places, and we should not enable foreign investors to take their compatriots here and to employ them here. We know that the former government enabled investors to employ about 20 to 25% of their compatriots as part of contract agreements, investment agreements. And this is entirely unacceptable. This is not a reasonable approach to this problem. Our main demand is to protect our labor market.
If we leave like minorities and economic problems here, and people say that nationalist movements are sometimes even against some religious groups, that is Muslims. Is it right? Like, do you sometimes go and protest against?
I understand. I would say that against some religious groups or behind some religious groups stand the state interests of other countries. For example, we believe and we are sure that behind religious movements in Georgia, especially, I mean, Muslims, there is much interest of the Turkish state, as this state adheres and follows the so-called pan-Turkism and neo-Osmanism policy. And we understand that the state of Turkey has some plans, and they openly say that Batumi and even Achara are historical part of Turkey, and when such considerations and are openly expressed in Georgia, Georgian people would start opposite movement always. And
so did you start any movement?
And this maybe would be reactive movements, but real threat exists, because we know that in Turkish textbooks they teach Turkish pupils that Batumi is a historical part of Turkey. And we consider and we believe that, and I repeat that, behind some religious groups may some state interests of Turkey or other countries may stand.
Can I?
If you, yeah, sure.
Yes. I mean, well, first of all, I think that, I do not have illusions that, like, there is an ethnic group who does not want to spread its values, or ethnic group who does not, a religious group does not want to spread its religious values. I mean, every religious community more or less wants to, spread its values. But yes, the problem, of course, if there is this big problem if one ethnic group thinks that it should, to override and conquer, invade the other ethnic group. This is clearly a problem. But I think we have to, if there are some groups in Turkey who think like this, I mean, that is, for me, that's unacceptable. But I think that our attitude towards this kind of groups should be that we have to be patient. I mean, we do not. I mean, if Georgians want to, retain their identity, it's not necessary to, aggressively attack others. I mean, you can retain your identity by just following your kind of values in your daily life. I mean, it's not necessary to go to somewhere and shout, and insult and offend other ethnic groups or religious groups in order to defend yourself. I mean, okay, I understand that these groups might be aggressive. I mean, there are some Muslims and there are some Christians who are very aggressive, who want you to be like them, right? I mean, there are such groups in Georgia. I'm sure there are such groups in Turkey. As far as I know, there are some groups in Turkey who are like this. I mean, aggressive. But I think we have to learn to manage the relations with extremists. I mean, it's not necessary to counteract with aggression. I mean, and aggression, I think, in most cases is counterproductive. I mean, when you show aggression, it causes always negative and opposite consequences from what you intended initially, right? So I think that we have to learn to defend our identity. I mean, and by our identity, I mean that I don't believe that, there is a homogeneous Georgian identity. I mean, there are Georgian Muslims, there are Georgian Christians, Georgian non-believers, Georgian Gregorians, right? So, I mean, Georgian is a pluralistic society. And never in history there was that everybody was homogeneous. And there are, like, we speak different dialects, I mean, we speak different languages, for instance. Okay, that is not a problem. So we have to realize that it's not necessary to show aggression towards others to defend your identity. You can defend your identity by following your values in your personal life and in your community. It's not necessary to attack others. It does no good to society, to anybody, to attack some groups.
How do you defend, like, your front or other nationalist movements, if I can say that?
Okay,
How do you defend that identity?
I agree with Georgi that aggression is unacceptable, and we believe that reasonable policy and reasonable attitudes are more acceptable and useful. Our main goal is to actualize real problems that exist before the Georgian nation, and to find the ways out to solve these problems. So we provide rather intellectual work than aggression. We have held tens of protest rallies, but no one will say that we have gone beyond the legislative norms and we have committed something illegal. We are trying to adhere to the legislation, to stay within legislation and attain our goals with legal norms and legal tools.
And shortly, if there are some nationalist movements, actions which you justify and you don't justify by names, if there are something.
Well, I don't justify people saying that the Georgia without Chinese, for instance. One politician said that. For me, it's unacceptable. Or Georgia, even like, or Georgia without I don't know, Muslims. Whereas you have Georgians who are historically practicing, Muslim Islam. So for me, this is unacceptable, and this is unequivocally bad. I mean, this is clearly bad. Well, if there is some groups who adhere to the concept of nation, which is not discriminative against ethnicity or religion, then that's okay for me. I don't have any problems with it. But the groups who say that like this particular ethnic minority should be expelled from Georgia, or Georgia only for Georgians, as was the slogan back in the early 90s of our first president. This is unacceptable.
Thank you for participation. Our guests were Evgeny Mikheladze and Georgi Tskhadoya. This was Focus of the Week. I'm Ani Gabrielian, and we will meet next week. Thank you.